In this section, we're going to look at the importance of the domain name and ideally having your keyword phrases within the domain name. Now, it's important to realize that the name of your website doesn't have to be the same as your company name. So as I think I mentioned before, my company is called Cheltenham Group, whereas my SEO training website is www.forseotraining.com.au. So basically I've snuck the words SEO and training into the domain name. Now it's important to realize that keywords in the URL have a small SEO effect. It used to have an enormous effect, but Google's cut back on that because too many people were just filling the URL with keywords. But it still has an effect. So the first thing, if you don't already have a website and you're going to create a new website, you need to see if a domain name is still available. Now within Australia, the company I'd recommend you think about using is called Crucial. So I've gone to their website here, which is www.crucial.com.au in Australia. And if I click where it says start hosting and then go down to domain names, within here I can type in a domain name and see if it's still available. So in this case I've typed in Perth Holiday Rentals, and if I just simply click on where it says get your domain, surprisingly this is actually available. It's always best to check your spellings, especially if your spelling's as bad as mine. So P-E-R-T-H, Perth Holiday Rentals. Yep, that seems alright. So if I wanted, I could go ahead and order this domain. In Australia, you buy domain names in 2-year blocks. If you're buying something like a .com or a .co.uk, then those generally are available for 1-year blocks. It's just the way things are in Australia. It's a minimum 2 years. Notice that it's actually also selected these other variants as well. If I didn't want these, I could just click on unselect and unselect. On the other hand, as we'll see in a minute, it might be an idea to actually bag these other versions as well. So this top version is a .com.au, which is the preferred version within Australia. Then there's a .net.au, and then there's a .net. I could also register this one as well, which is perthholidayrentals.org.au. Now the thing is, if you buy up multiple domain names, you don't want to all have them pointing to your real website. The idea, as we'll see in a minute, is if you buy up these alternative domain names, it just stops other people buying those. And as you can see, they're not very expensive, and as you can see, some are cheaper than others. This idea of buying up multiple similar domain names is called cyber squatting. Basically, you can bag those names now, and as I say, prevent your competitors from registering similar URLs. So I won't go through the whole process, but if I wanted to actually buy this, I'd just click on add cart, go through the normal process, and then that would be my domain name bought. So the obvious question is, well, what do you do if your preferred name is taken? Well, in a lot of cases, people have got all the obvious names. So in this example here, if you've got a plumbing company in Perth, then I'm pretty sure that Plumbing Perth would be registered, and all the sort of obvious variants would also be registered. So sometimes you have to be a little bit creative. In my case, as I think I mentioned before, I came to Australia in about 2007, I think it was. And in Australia, you have to have an Australian company number in order to buy an Australian.com.au. And by the time I got to Australia, someone else had already bought SEOtraining.com.au. So what I did was I just simply registered for SEOtraining.com.au. Sometimes you might have to buy an alternative. So for instance, if you wanted something like over here, Perth Plumbing Service, as you can see, the .com.au is already registered at the time of doing this, whereas the .net.au is available and the .net is available. It's important to realize that if you're in Australia, the best type of URL to have is a .com.au. If you're after international business or you're based in the United States, then really you want a .com. If you're in somewhere like the UK, you'd have a .co.uk, and you'll find that in those various areas, like in England, for instance, in the UK, generally a .co.uk will outperform, for instance, a .net version or something else. So Google does seem to give preference to sort of the national URL, as it were. Certainly if you're after international business, you really want a .com, because in America rather, people might wonder what a .com.au is. They might think it's Austria or something. So as I say, think about buying up alternatives, the .net AU and the .com versions and all the rest of it. The cost of buying domains is very inexpensive, and as I say, it just kind of protects your investment really. So if you've got a sort of unique name, buy up all the different variations and it just stops somebody else from registering them. Because by and large, URLs are given out on a first come, first served basis. There are caveats to that, obviously. If you try and register a domain name with a registered trademark in it, for instance, if you try to register, for sake of argument, Coca-Cola Australia.com.au, well, firstly, I pretty much guarantee Coca-Cola would have actually registered that already, but if they hadn't, then you'd be laying yourself open to sort of legal issues there. So don't use other people's trademarks within your domain name. Incidentally, if you do buy up a whole load of different URLs and you have all these URLs pointing to a single website, at first glance that seems like a pretty cool idea, and I've seen this many times. In actual fact, if you have like half a dozen different URLs all pointing to a single website, then Google may see each website as multiple websites with similar content and view this as an attempt to spam the search engines. Just because you own half a dozen URLs, Google doesn't necessarily realize that, and as I say, it will just see duplicate content all over the place. So, never use identical content on multiple websites. Now, using the 2 or 4 trick, as I mentioned, when I got to Australia, SEOtraining.com.au had already been bought up. So what I did was I just stuck a 4 in front of it, so it's like a kind of play on words, for SEO training. I could have used a 2, so for instance I could have 2 get found in google.com.au or something like that. The advantage of this is that it seems to be, from Google's point of view, if you have a single digit in front of your domain name, that's almost as good as having the same version of the URL but without the number in front of it. As I said, buying up international versions of the URL is quite a good idea, except that in a lot of countries you can't do this. So as I already mentioned, in Australia, you have to have a registered company name in order to register the URL, and I believe the same is true for Ireland. With .coms and .co.uk's, on the other hand, anybody can buy them. And as I said, there are different versions, .net, .org, .info. In fact, there's loads now. There's .euro, I'm trying to think of some other versions. There's loads and loads of the different URL extensions now. Just buy up the common ones. Don't go for some of the more exotic ones. I believe there's also a TV extension, which I think belongs to a small island somewhere, and they're actually the island's making a lot of money out of it, because they're selling these at inflated prices to people just so they can have a company name followed by a .tv. There are lots of places that will sell expired domain names. They kind of hoard them up and sell them for inflated prices. You should be very careful about buying an expired domain name, because you don't know what sort of history has been attached to that domain name. What I mean by that is that if a website has abused Google's guidelines in some way, then that domain name could have been marked as a sort of bad URL by Google, and sometimes you've got no way of telling if you just simply buy a domain name from one of these brokers. So try and do some research, see if the domain name has been blacklisted. An obvious thing is just type the domain name in and see if it's listed at all within the Google search results. But as I say, treat old domains with caution if you're buying them. In a similar vein, you can basically purchase an entire website. So let's say you're thinking of starting a company. You can go to lots of places where they actually sell up and running websites, and a common example would be something like Flipper. So the idea of Flipper, the reason it's called Flipper, is people write websites and flip them. As soon as they write them, they just sell them. So on Flipper, to be honest, most of the websites you'll find on there have very little value, and which is why a lot of them are sold very cheaply. That said, if you keep an eye on Flipper, every so often you get a really good website and for one reason or another it's being sold really cheaply. But it's the old thing, if a deal looks too good to be true, it probably is. So again, just check everything very, very carefully. So this is what Flipper looks like. So as you can see, there's lots of websites and also domain names and also apps for sale. So for instance, if you look down here, you've got a couple of dodgy looking domain names. You've got this one here, which is Super Consciousness, and they're asking $25,000 just for the domain name, which I know nothing about it, but that seems a little excessive. If you come down here, there's some others. Supersave.net. As I said, .net addresses are not really what you want. You want a .com or a .com.au or a .co.uk or .ie if you're in Ireland. So I would advise against going for .nets. They're just harder to promote. Over here you've got fully featured websites. So what have we got? Anything interesting? Poppopdeals.com. No idea what that is. If we click on see all, you can see some more. So if I just scroll down here, as you can see, there's loads of different websites for sale. We'll just pick on one at random. Update SEOlink.com. Let's go and have a look at that one. Well, apparently the site is 5 years old. It's making about $120 a month from advertising, apparently. I'm not saying it's not, but what I am saying is check any claims you see on here with caution. Do your own checking, and just go and make sure that things are as they're advertised, basically. If I click here, we'll look at the actual website, and that's the live website. So it's there if you want it. Go and check it out. It's flipper.com. And that's spelled F-L-I-P-P-A. There are alternatives to Flipper, and Netflix, another one there. Let's say just go and have a look, see what's out there. There are a whole load of places where you can buy premium website domains. These are companies basically who've either registered or bought up premium domain names with really good domain names, and they'll charge you a lot of money to actually buy a domain from them. But again, it might be worth it. It depends what sort of business you're in. In a similar vein, there are various companies here or various websites where you can basically see websites that have recently expired for one reason or another. So you've got Fresh Drop and Just Dropped and what have you. So this is what Fresh Drop looks like, and you can do various filters here to determine how good or bad a particular domain name is, and you can sort of scroll down here and find all sorts of domain names. So let's find something interesting. Well, I'm searching in vain. I can't find anything that I'd actually want to buy, but again, it's just another source of information. Go and check it out.